Thank you all for staying. I am Melanie George, Associate Curator here at Jacob's Pillow, and for this week of Compagnie Käfig's performance, I'm also a scholar in residence, so I'm filling that role right now. And I am joined by Martin Baldock, who is going to translate, because I can only speak ballet terms in French. So we have a conduit between me and these wonderful artists. And I'm going to actually ask each of you to introduce yourselves, and then I'll say some questions that Martin will then convey. Yes, please.
So, my name is Nina, I'm a contortionist.
Je m'appelle Mboup Ibrahima, je suis sénégalais qui vit à Paris, professeur Rollard.
He's a dancer and he lives in Paris and he's from Senegal.
Bonjour à tous, moi je suis Kader, je suis danseur et assistant du chorégraphe. Je suis à la compagnie depuis 24 ans.
So Kader is the assistant choreographer and he's also a dancer, of course, and he's been with the company for combien d'années? 24 years.
So I think maybe I'll say a few things and then I'll let you translate a little bit too. Yeah. So I'm sure you as an audience have many questions about like how does it work. I too have those questions. And so, but also I was saying I'm not sure I want to know too much. I don't want to know that Santa Claus isn't real. But I do want to start with, in the work, there's so much you have to do to engage with this. What is the rehearsal process when the tech is not there?
Comment vous répétez si, en fait, juste en dansant sans qu'il y ait nécessairement toute la technique derrière?
Pour ce spectacle-là, on avait déjà la technique.
Okay, so you always rehearse with the technical equipment or the projection and all that.
Ce qui était difficile, c'est justement, par exemple, si je prends l'exemple du dernier tableau, où on a le sol qui bouge.
Yeah, it's difficult when the floor is moving. So in the last tableau that you saw, when the floor is moving.
Il faut être capable avec le corps, de montrer que le sol bouge. C'est-à-dire de trouver des mouvements où on n'est jamais arrêté.
Yeah, to be able to provoke the illusion that he's also moving with the floor. Basically, that's the real challenge.
Yeah, the body constantly needs to be moving with the floor. So that's the challenging bit as a dancer.
Et ce qu'il faut savoir aussi, c'est que la vision que les spectateurs ont, on n'a pas la même sur scène.
Yeah, the illusion is great because you don't see the same thing as you see from the audience perspective.
Donc à un moment donné, il a fallu qu'on se mette à la place des spectateurs pour qu'on comprenne comment le danser.
So they have to think just like you in the audience, so they have the perfect reaction and how to move according to what they know or they think you see.
Et donc c'était un travail avec Adrien et Claire qui ont créé le numérique. Donc c'était un échange entre eux et nous pour trouver la meilleure façon de travailler. En fait, vas-y.
So it was an exchange between Claire and Adrian B, who were there during the rehearsal process to be able to create all this thing. And like Kader was saying, at some point, us dancers, we had to stay as the audience to see what actually was projected, because when we hear, we just see a 2D projection, not a 3D. So it's very different. And to understand what you're going to see, what you'll see, we had to stay in the audience.
Oh, that's fascinating. So then this is, okay, so there's a lot of hip-hop movement in the work, and hip-hop is an inherently improvisatory dance style. Is there space for improvisation in the work?
Est-ce que vous avez de la place pour l'improvisation quand vous travaillez? Le hip-hop étant quelque chose qui était plus improvisation, est-ce que ça vous impose un peu plus de travail?
Ça nous impose un petit peu plus de travail parce qu'il faut être en accord avec le numérique. C'est-à-dire que quand, par exemple, le mur tombe, il faut être au même moment pour donner l'effet.
So it's all about synchronization.
Mais après, on a des parties, bien évidemment, dans les solos, où on a une part d'improvisation.
So during the solo, they all have time and space for improvisation as well.
Et après, c'est aussi suivant, comment dire, l'énergie qu'on peut avoir le jour même. Je peux faire tel mouvement, le lendemain, je peux en créer un autre. Je sais par contre le temps que j'ai. Je sais que je ne dois pas dépasser telle durée.
So the improv is always limited in a certain amount of time, and from one day to another, or representation to the other, he might have a different inspiration to do the movement, but he will always have to respect a duration.
I might add, because I'm not hip hop, for me it's there's a mapping actually. There's the technician, he's got an iPad and he tracks the movement I do. So in my solo, there's not one day where I do the same thing. There's a framework. There's some, I know the trajectory I'm going to do, but every day I move differently, which is what I love as this piece, which is contortion dance. Because I usually work in circus where it's very, very set movement. Here I've got this flexibility of...
Literally, figuratively.
Yes, both ways. But there's not one day where I'm going to do the same thing, because it's a live mapping, so it doesn't matter.
So yeah, I guess that's my ultimate question about the technology, because it's so responsive to what you all are doing, or you're so responsive to it. How much is happening in real time, and how much is programmed in? Like, how does the illusion, or is it not an illusion? Quelle
est la part de live et...
Quelle est la part je dirais un 50-50.
50-50.
Ouais. D'ailleurs, c'était très compliqué parce que nous, comme on danse, donc on compte la musique.
When we dance, we count times, we count.
Ce qui était compliqué avec Adrien et Claire, c'est qu'ils calent musicalement leurs effets.
Whereas Claire and Adrian, they set things musically. So it's a bit different, because we time the music, but they set to accents the different things.
Et bien évidemment, ce qui est intéressant, c'est qu'il y a une part aussi de direct, où on a des techniciens qui nous suivent, d'ailleurs, qui ont une tablette et qui suivent notamment Ibou dans son solo.
But there's also a live part, like I was saying, with the iPad, they track the movements, for instance, for Ibou in his solo.
Il y a Ibou, il y a aussi voilà,
me too.
Voilà, donc c'est très compliqué parce que l'iPad il est comme ça et du coup il est tout petit et du coup il faut essayer de suivre le danseur.
And that's the hard bit, because the iPad is small and you have to actually, the tiniest movement is going to have a very big impact on a big stage, so that's the big challenge.
Mais c'est intéressant aussi d'avoir et l'enregistrement et le live.
But that's the magic, that there's a live part and a set predefined part.
Ibou, am I saying correctly? Ibou? Ibou.
Yes.
The velocity with which you are spinning in relationship to all of those moving graphics, what is that experience like for you? Is it dizzying? Is it like, how do you keep yourself centered with all of that internal motion and external motion that's happening?
Tu vas tellement vite, il y a tellement de graphiques autour, est-ce que tu n'as pas la tête qui tourne? Est-ce que c'est un challenge pour toi?
Oui, nous, à la base, nous, on avait l'habitude de le faire.
Naturally,
dehors.
he's used to doing this
Voilà,
outside.
du coup, quand on est arrivé dans la compagnie, on avait un petit peu de difficulté avec la vidéo, parce que quand on tourne, ça me faisait tourner la tête, je ne sais pas où je me trouve.
But it was in fact a challenge, because with the video plus the spinning around, he didn't know where to look, and so initially he was a bit dizzy.
Donc au fur et à mesure, j'ai pu m'adapter. Maintenant, quand je tourne, je m'amuse plus comme un enfant qui joue avec, voilà.
But with time, he got used to it, and now he's a bit like a kid playing with the graphics.
C'est vrai qu'au début, quand on a créé le spectacle, ce qui était compliqué pour nous aussi les danseurs, c'est qu'on était dans une boîte noire avec les pixels toute la journée. Et du coup, au bout d'un moment, on avait la tête qui tournait. Et ça, c'était compliqué à le prendre en compte. Parce qu'au bout d'un moment, on était là, la tête qui tourne, toujours à regarder le sol, toujours avec les pixels. Mais ça, c'est une habitude qu'on a prise.
So initially in the rehearsal process, it was a very hard thing because we were just like in a black box with pixels all around all the time. And so at some point we were like very dizzy and it was a learning curve. We had to learn to work with this moving pixels, but it was a bit...
Et quand on était en train de créer le spectacle, alors la part de numérique est très compliquée parce qu'il faut un encodage particulier.
So the technical part is pretty hard because you had to encode numerically the animations.
Donc du coup, les danseurs ont créé un tableau et d'un coup, hop, il fallait faire l'encodage et hop, on s'arrêtait 1 heure. On reprenait ensuite, donc c'était difficile pour les danseurs de s'arrêter, de reprendre à chaque fois.
And it was hard for us as dancers because we were creating, for instance, a set of movement, and then bam, we had to stop for an hour because the technical people had to encode the animation and then restart. So it's constantly like move, set back, move, set back.
Mais ce qui est intéressant, en fait, le travail de Mourad Merzouki, qui est le chorégraphe, il aime les choses aussi qui sont, où il y a des difficultés, où il y a quelque chose qui va nous mettre à trouver des mouvements nouveaux. C'est-à-dire avec le numérique ici, ou vertical, quand on danse dans un autre spectacle, où on est attaché, on danse une sorte de danse-escalade. Donc dans la difficulté, on trouve de nouveaux mouvements.
So the beauty of Mourad's work is that he loves challenges and he likes to put dancers in a challenging space to enable us to create new things. For instance, so in this show with the numerical animation, but with his other show Vertical, where it's a vertical dance, literally, and so you set in a new environment and new things are created in these kind of environments, and that's what he loves.
So I think we have some time to take some questions from the audience. Just to give you a little bit of protocol, you're going to ask your question and then I'm going to repeat it because we're recording, and then they will answer and then it will be translated. So we have a 4-stage process for these questions today. If anyone has a question, please raise your hand. There's one in the back and then we'll come over here. So the question is about how to integrate all of the elements between the music, the technology, and the dancing. And I'll just add to that, I'm wondering how long was the development process from the beginning thoughts to getting it to the stage?
Alors, combien de temps est-ce que ça a duré toute la création entre l'idée et l'aboutissement? Alors ça, c'était une question. Et ensuite, comment est-ce qu'on a intégré la danse, la musique et les animations?
D'accord.
Bon, on l'a déjà un peu répondu.
Ouais, on a Mourad, on va dire, a l'idée de travailler avec Adrien et Claire déjà. Tout le processus dure à peu près 1 an, le temps qu'il travaille avec Adrien, le temps qu'il réunit l'équipe artistique, c'est-à-dire Adrien et Claire, Johan Tivoli pour la lumière, Armand Amar pour la musique, et ensuite les danseurs qui veulent. Donc ça dure à peu près 1 an. Une fois qu'on est en résidence, c'est 3 mois de résidence avec les danseurs et tout le monde.
So first, it took about a year first to decide who to congregate the team, to find the technicians, the dancers, but Mourad had already the idea of working with Claire and Adrian B. So that was set, and then he had to find the team, and then it was 3 months of intense intense creation of residency.
Après, la musique, ça a été créé par un musicien qui s'appelle Armand Amar, qui a beaucoup écrit pour les musiques de films.
The music was created by Armand Amar, which is a film music director.
Et là, c'était un peu pareil, c'est-à-dire qu'au départ, on crée la danse Armand voit un petit peu les chorégraphies et nous propose des musiques.
And so for the music, Armand was there, and we, the dancers, suggested. We said some movements, and then Armand went back to do some to make music and suggest us a piece, and then it's kind of this feedback process. Maybe we can twitch this, and so between the music and the dance.
On est en résidence avec la personne qui va faire la lumière, le musicien, les danseurs, pour que vraiment ça soit des questions-réponses et qu'on trouve la meilleure manière de faire avancer le projet.
But everyone was there, the technician, the light technician, the music, everyone was there in the residency so that we could make something coherent.
Et le scénographe aussi qui crée
Plus the scenography.
Les tapis, les lumières.
The person who creates the stage, who envisions, okay, we want this flat and white stage, and this is the scenography.
I feel like I should also add that one of the things that France has that we do not, or we have much less of, is they have multiple choreographic centers and that allow for work to be developed, to have 3 months of intense time in a way that our sort of ecosystem functions quite differently at the detriment of the artists. And so that's how you can get to something that's so sort of awestruck, because you need that time and those resources to be able to do it. There was a question over here. Yeah. So the question was about how does it feel to be the only woman in the group, and what was the transition like for you to go from circus work to concert dance?
So to be the only female is great because men take care of you in this way. But it's true that there's a very masculine energy, but it doesn't bother me at all. I think when you're with a lot of women, it's another energy. I like it. I like. Comment est-ce que je me sens en étant la seule femme? A lot of testosterone sometimes, and sometimes you just need to go back and you're like, okay, let them live their thing. You know?
Oui, bien sûr. Après, ce qu'il faut savoir, c'est que cette pièce-là, il y a une danseuse, mais il y a d'autres pièces de la compagnie où il peut y avoir 6 danseuses, 7 danseuses. C'est vraiment, ça dépend des pièces en fait.
Yeah, and Murad's work, it depends. Like there's other pieces where there's more female, and in fact, I started working with Murad on another piece, and then they put me on this one. Because we're 3 women to share this role, because there's so many dates, we cannot do them all, and so we are 3 women. But if you see the show with one of the other dancers, it's going to be something different. We all move in different ways, and that's the beauty, as I was saying, is that it's a live thing, so you can see it tomorrow, it's going to look differently.
And the Murad they keep referring to, for those who haven't read your program note, is Murad Mouzaki, who is the founder and director of the company. There was a question back there, and then I'll head this way. Yes. So the question is about the manipulation of the imagery. Is it being done as it happens, or is it something that is set choreographically between the movement and the projection that does not change?
Alors, je te la trans... Alors, en gros, est-ce que c'est live quand, par exemple, ça devient tout noir? Quelle est la part de live et de pas live? Alors, well, for instance, the pixel that moves when the dancer moves, this is done live. Okay, when Ibou comes and the thing becomes all black, this is set, but he knows when it happens, so he moves accordingly.
Est-ce qu'ils ont vu la différence entre le live et le...
Bah justement, non.
Non.
So this piece has worked because you didn't see the difference between the live part and the pre-recorded stuff.
Yes. Santa Claus exists. Question down front. So the question is, when did you know you would become a dancer? For all 3 of you.
Quand est-ce que vous avez su que vous vouliez devenir danseur professionnel?
Moi, j'ai su que je voulais être danseur pas danseur professionnel, danseur. quand j'ai vu une émission en France qui s'appelait HIP-HOP.
He knew he wanted to be a dancer, not specially professional, when he saw a French TV show called
HIP-HOP.
HIP-HOP.
Et en fait, je ne savais pas qu'on pouvait en faire son métier. Donc pour moi, c'était juste au départ une passion.
But he didn't know at that time that you could live out of it. It was just a passion, just a hobby.
Et en fait, c'est quand j'ai commencé à savoir faire quelques mouvements.
And it's when he started to be able to do some tricks.
Voilà, et que les gens ils disaient waouh, tu
And
danses
that
super bien.
people were like, wow.
Que j'avais l'impression d'être quelqu'un et que du coup, je me suis dit, j'avais envie de continuer.
That he thought he could be someone, and that it pushed him to pursue this, to do dance competitions.
Et après, je suis rentré dans des compagnies de danse professionnelles. Et là, j'ai compris qu'on pouvait en vivre, en fait.
And then organically he entered dance companies, and he understood that you could live out of it. And I might add that the French system is very well done for professional artists, because we have a system that you accumulate a certain number of hours, and in the year after, these days where you don't work, you have already put some money apart and you are paid daily. So it pushes the creation process. It's hard to get into it, but once you're in there, you can live nicely out of it. And for COVID, for instance, we were very lucky compared to other countries. Ouais, c'est ça.
Do either of you also want to answer that question?
Vas-y, à toi.
Pour ma part, j'ai commencé avec la danse, breakdance, juste pour m'amuser avec les amis dans notre quartier.
He started with breakdance with his friends in Senegal.
Et dans les années 99, on a vu une vidéo avec les Américains qui faisaient du roller dance.
And in the 90s, in 99, he saw a video of Americans doing roller dance.
Et ça m'a plu, du coup j'ai acheté des rollers, j'ai commencé à m'entraîner.
So he bought a pair of roller skates and he started to train.
Du coup, par la suite, le fait de mélanger la danse et le roller dance, c'est presque la même discipline. Voilà.
So and then he understood that mixing dance and roller became roller dance very naturally.
Et au Sénégal, c'était original parce que il n'y avait pas beaucoup de danseurs qui font du roller dance.
And in Senegal, it worked very well because there's not many dancers who do especially roller dance.
Du coup, grâce à ça, j'ai voyagé beaucoup jusqu'à venir vivre en France et être dans la compagnie Käfig.
And he was able, because of that, to travel internationally and land in France and land in this company.
So I feel like I need to ask you how you maintain your body and that flexibility year after year after year.
It's a daily thing. And just to answer the question before, I started with gymnastics, but I did a PhD in astrophysics. I didn't do dance. It's just where I was doing the PhD, there was a lot of circus around, and I started to play around, and people were like, "Wow, this is crazy!" And then I got very organically professional contracts. I switched. And it's been 10 years, and
Well, you're still doing physics in a way, right, with your body.
yes, yes. But it's the art of balance, force counter force. Yeah, and it's a daily work.
Well, we do need to wrap up, but if I could get another round of applause for Compagnie Käfig.